social justice was something that was incredibly important to my parents. It was something that we learned about from a very early age. It was something that is sort of one of my guiding values, and sort of sticking up for the little guy. And so, if we would see injustice in the world, it was on us to help fix it.
Welcome to the Represent More podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Clarkson.
And I'm your co-host, Shireen Clarkson.
All right, we have something really exciting today. We've got a special guest, and it's Tracey Cowan.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Tracey.
How are you?
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So Tracey is a partner at our firm who runs our fertility, negligence, and sexual assault practices. And she is a total badass, and we're just happy to talk with you today.
I'm very excited about it.
We have our partner meeting, which we do a monthly partner think tank, and the July think tank is happening right after we film this. So this is a great opportunity to get you in studio and chat.
Yeah, I've watched a couple of these. I think I'm a little ready, but we'll see how it goes.
Have you heard us talking about you? Because we have been anticipating this episode for a while now.
Oh, I missed those. I missed those moments. I'll have to go back.
Yeah.
It's true.
Hopefully only good things were said.
Always. And we're going to get into it. We're going to talk all about all things Tracey Cowan today.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about what we've been up to, because we just got through the 4th of July weekend. Mm-hmm. And what did you do for 4th of July, Tracey?
So we had a pretty laid back 4th this year. We normally have like a big party up at my stepsister's house, but they went camping very rudely. So we ended up having, we hosted at home. We had our in-laws over. My husband is an amazing cook and grill master, so he grilled up some delicious meats and some asparagus. So he did some steaks. We got a bunch of like these sausages from this specialty butcher place that he got. They were all incredible. They were all delicious. We had like venison sausages and wild boar sausages.
Didn't have any of that.
And he did like asparagus, and it was just it was
classy.
Phenomenal.
That sounds high end.
It was really good. And then my in-laws brought an apple pie from a bakery up near them called Mom's. So it was Mom's apple pie, and it was phenomenal. It was just terrific. so good. So yeah, and then the kids got to do some pool time, and it was nice. It was very Americana.
How old are you? How old are the kids?
So I have 2 sons, and they are 5 and 9. And they are very, very different. One of them is very much like Dan, and one of them is very much like me, and they look similar to us. It's weird. It's like we got our kids from Central Casting.
Yeah. And that's true of height as well, because you're not tall. Not a very tall person.
No.
But Dan is what, 6'7"?
He's 6'7". Yeah, he's 6'7". Luckily, so far it looks like both of the boys are going to take after him.
Okay.
As far as height, which is good, because I just didn't want to be blamed. There was if there was any discrepancy there. But our hope, like fingers crossed, that they don't take after him so much, because the world is not built for that Great Dane.
Dans.
Yeah, I consider him to be a Great Dane,
Okay.
right? Like he's just a little bit too big for everything.
Okay.
So we're hoping they get to be a little bit more in line with airport seating and what have you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic 4th of July. We were in Michigan.
Yeah. We had even more Americana 4th of July than you. I'm going to take a guess and say, just because it was filled with lake life, tubing, actual hot dogs, not like fancy ones.
Oh, fun.
Hot dogs. And
Ballpark Franks.
Yeah. Chips and cookies. I ate like
we were at a ball game all weekend.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was.
I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
Like the lake life in Michigan, can't beat it.
No.
That's incredible.
It's a good 4th of July weekend for sure.
It was fantastic. And then I had a birthday yesterday, which was
You did.
Yeah.
it's a birthday.
You did.
So
Turning 35, the big 35.
Right. I'm in my last year of my 40s. So
Oh, I love that you
got to live it up.
yeah,
You're a man.
yeah,
You
I've
would.
got to really get it into the next year, because at 50, everything changes. Isn't that right?
Does it?
We
don't know.
No,
we
I
don't
know.
know about that.
I'm not asking you based on experience, but based on what you've heard.
I've heard that. I have heard that.
Everything I've heard about my 40s has been wrong. So I don't know what to trust anymore. So what have you thought? What have you found over your 40s? Is it what you expected, or is it different?
Well, I think when I was just on the precipice of turning 40, a lot of people in their 40s told me that the 40s were going to be very different. And they've been different in some ways, but mostly wonderful ways. It's been kind of an era of family and career, which has been wonderful. I mean, that's kind of my entire life right now. But, I haven't felt old. I still feel young, and it's been, so I guess in that respect, it's been wonderful.
What's that like? You feeling young? That's
You don't feel that? Come on. You
well,
guys
I
feel
felt
young.
old in my 30s, so it's not, but not in a bad way. Like, no, I think
you didn't feel old in your 30s.
Some of them, but
I want to know what you meant by but your 40s have been nothing like what people said or what you thought.
People paint your 40s as being this horrible thing, especially for women. I think particularly, maybe not necessarily as much for men, but I think they're like, oh, you have no idea. You're going to be so tired. You're not going to be, everything's like, their body's going to change in ways that are very unhappy. And like, it's just going to be awful. And no one's going to look at you and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, like none of that's true. Like it is kind of lovely to like be able to be a little incognito. That does happen a little bit, but I think it's like in the best way possible. And I don't feel old. I don't feel like constantly, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of really awful things that are said to women about their 40s, especially like as you approach them.
Okay.
And I haven't experienced that at all. I feel great. I've had such a strong, I feel like every year is getting better, honestly. And I suddenly, have a lot more authority that I never had. And that was not something that I kind of ever thought I'd get in that way.
You mean in career wise or something?
Yeah. In career wise and in other spheres. And it's like, it's really lovely to sort of finally realize that and not really foreseeing that was going to be the case in the way that it has been. And I think it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed it.
That's nice. That's a great perspective and experience that you're having in your 40s.
Yeah.
You are Tracey Cowan though. So, you're having a good decade and I love it.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
I want to go back. So let's start from the beginning and then we're going to get into this decade eventually. But let's go back. So tell us about your childhood, starting with where were you born, where you grew up, what kind of kid were you?
So I was born outside of Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay, Midwest, let's go.
Yeah. But I was there for like less than a year. And then we moved to Maryland, to Frederick, Maryland. And then, so we then moved like every 5 years.
Okay.
Because my dad was the superintendent of schools. And, he would do, every 5 years or so, he would trade up for like a bigger school district. And so we did a lot of moving around. I was in Maryland and then I was in Kansas and then I was back in Maryland, but in Baltimore. And I was always, I was not the kid that grew up with everybody. I was like the new kid a lot.
Okay.
And very early on, and I was the youngest of 5. I have 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, and they're all much older than me. And, when like the closest one is 6 years older.
Okay.
And, I was the baby. I was the spoiled rotten. That was, and very early on, I got very into theater. And I started doing children's theater when I was like 6 or 7.
I totally can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I will try not to take offense.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's great.
But yeah, I did dance and music, and singing, and I was always in some community theater project. And so that was really great for me because we moved around a lot. It's a community that you can really easily sort of fall into no matter what, even if you're, trying to adjust to a new.
Yeah. As the new kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that was me. I was just never met a stage I didn't like when I was a kid.
And then when did you ultimately settle down, and kind of where did that take place?
So that was in Baltimore. We moved there when I was 12. And then we ended up living there until I went, to college. My parents then continued moving after that. But I consider Baltimore really where I grew up.
Is that Frederick or Baltimore?
Baltimore.
Oh, it was Baltimore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Frederick was where I was when I was much younger. We moved when I was 7. But then I did most of middle school and high school in Baltimore.
Okay.
Baltimore County, not like Baltimore City. But yeah, that's where I grew up.
That's all fascinating. So a couple of commonalities. Quentin lives in Frederick, which is kind of an interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he does. And I grew up as one of 5 kids. You may know that, with 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Yes,
as well. How did you like growing up in a big family? I know that you said you were the baby, and there was quite a spread of years, 6 years between you and your closest age sibling. But did you grow up close with your brothers and sisters?
So I loved growing up in a big family, but because they were all so much older, by the time we moved to Baltimore when I was 12, they were all out of the house. So I got kind of both experiences. I got the only child experience.
Sure.
And I got growing up in a big family experience, just at different times in my life. It was, I just had all these older people in my life that were so cool that I just wanted to be with all the time. And so a lot of times they were like, get out of here. But then I got to go visit my, older siblings at college and get like an eye into that. And I really loved it. I love it now because I'm still very close with my siblings, and they're these people that are very different from me, like pretty wildly different than me in a lot of different ways, that I wouldn't necessarily know, under any other circumstances. And I've gotten to learn a lot from them.
Are any of them lawyers?
So my older brother, Chuck, he goes by Chuck now. He was Charlie when I was growing up. He was a lawyer for many years, but he escaped, as he would put it, and now is no longer a lawyer. He lives in Australia, and
the shrimp on the bobby.
Yeah,
no?
yeah, that's what they say there all the time.
Interesting.
All they say.
Interesting commentary.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, do you ever? Can you do an Australian accent?
I will not.
Please,
but
I
can if I've been there for a while. I start talking with an Australian accent, and it's very annoying.
Maybe after a cocktail.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
the Australian accent will come out.
I do know that if you pronounce any word that would have a hard A as an I, that works.
Give me an example.
So, did you win the race today? Did you win the rice today?
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Good.
Just use an I instead of an A.
Oh, very good.
It's my little trick.
Could you do that for the rest of this episode? It would just be so fun.
No.
I think part of a problem.
I was trying to figure out a way to say no.
Yeah, is that I pick up accents really quickly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a mirroring thing that I do.
Yeah.
Which I kind of hate about myself.
Right.
But I'll do it. So when I'm in Australia and I'll start speaking in a little bit of an Australian accent to people.
Yeah.
And they're like,
what are you, Madonna?
Right.
Like, what's happening exactly? And I do it all the time. I do it like when I'm speaking to anybody who has any sort of an accent. And I think it's part of like my theater kid background, like rearing its head and being like.
So that's cool. So Chuck escaped the law, moved to Australia, and
Yes.
And what about your other siblings?
So my eldest brother is David. He lives in Cleveland. Most of the time he lives actually with my father. And they, he helps my father with various businesses, and he also does some things as well. And then the next eldest is my sister Jennifer, and she lives in DC. And she works with I'm always going to get the name of the organization wrong, but it's the World Development Bank, and they do a lot of sort of economic and financial support for a lot of primarily Latin-speaking countries. And it's a huge organization in DC. Yeah. My sister is a translator.
Oh, how cool.
And she's speaks fluently in Spanish and in Portuguese. And she's just incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you speak any foreign languages?
I speak Spanish badly.
Okay.
Very badly. But she's obviously incredible. She was in the Peace Corps.
Excellent.
And she lived in Paraguay for a number of years. I actually went and visited her while she was in the Peace Corps.
In Paraguay?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
It was incredible. It was a great experience for me to have. I think at the time it was quite difficult. Mm-hmm. But she lived in, a 2-room house that took it took most of a day to get to from Asuncion, from the capital city. And luckily she had a horse, but it's all dirt roads. When it would rain, you weren't going anywhere. The nearest neighbor was like half a mile, or maybe a mile away.
Wow.
And I slept with a machete under my bed,
as one
and
tends to.
Like at times would have to, people were just interested in us, right? Okay. And so like people would come and like scratched on the back door of the room that I was in. It was
seems a bit unnerving.
It was a little unnerving, but mostly all the people were lovely. Okay. And I met a lot of people from wildly different backgrounds to anything I would ever experience. And I think it was really eye-opening for me. I was 15, and I was, I think I was getting a little comfortable.
Oh, that was when you were 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, to go to a place where you, like any water you have to pull out of the well. There's no bathroom. Like you have to go through, to
intense.
Yeah. And, she grew most of her food, and, it was pretty incredible.
Must have been quite a formative experience and eye-opening for you, I imagine.
Yeah. And also just getting to speak to all of the people around. I actually spoke much better Spanish at that time, but the area of Paraguay that she lived in, they speak a native dialect called Guarani. And it's actually, I guess it's more similar to Japanese is what she told me.
Interesting.
Just sort of in how the language developed. So I had to speak all of my communication with the people that we would go visit who lived around there was mostly through her. There were some people who spoke Spanish that I could speak to, but it was a really interesting experience. I met a lot of people from all walks of life, and I spent a lot of time with other people who were in the Peace Corps, which was pretty cool.
That is cool. So you had this very interesting experience that most parents have, where they become empty nesters, but you kind of became an empty nester of sorts as a kid too.
I did. Yeah.
And then you suddenly felt like more of an only child and had a more solitary kind of family experience other than mom and dad, it sounds like.
Yeah.
What was that transition like? And then did that kind of inform what kind of, child you became? I know you went into the arts, right, with theater and that sort of thing. What about school? What kind of subjects were you into and that sort of thing?
So I was always very so I ended up actually going to an arts magnet for high school. So I majored in theater. And we would have, like an hour and a half a day you would spend on your major. So I went to this incredible arts magnet, in Baltimore County, and I got to, study theater. I got to do these huge productions. We had these enormous theaters, and there were different primes is what they called them, but different majors. And so we would do these huge theater productions, but there was like a carpentry and electrical prime as well at this school because it had previously been a vocational school, and they would build us these insane sets, right? And I got to get very into lighting and tech work, so I did a lot of that. But I was always, I was into English, and I was into, I took debate,
I mean, all of this sounds like it was a natural precursor to law school and becoming a lawyer.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about your post high school education, where you went to undergrad and law school, and kind of how that path.
Yeah. Well, I will say, before I talk about college, I will say, when I was growing up, my dad went to law school at night.
Oh.
He was, because it was something he knew his mother really would have wanted for him to be a lawyer. And so he got his law degree at night school when I was very young. And he has always been fascinated by the law. And so even though he ended up getting his doctorate in education, or his, PhD in education, and then being a superintendent, he was always fascinated with the law. And so growing up, I was always right there arguing, debating, like that was my thing. And he always used to tell me, it's law offices of Berger and Berger. We're going to do it. We're going to be, we're going to do the law. We're going to have our own offices. And I would always say, oh no, I would never want to be a lawyer. Oh no.
Oh, interesting.
I would never want to be a lawyer. Oh, that would be so boring.
Because you wanted to be an actor.
Because I wanted to be an actress.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's funny now, right? So, so parents get to be right at the end of the day.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, your father sounds like he was, quite accomplished, PhD and JD.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. So education was always incredibly important in our home, as you can imagine. And my brother, who lives in Australia now, is probably to this day is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And so I grew up in a culture of education, and really the importance of that. And we were all public school kids. My dad was a public school superintendent. We were raised in a very liberal household.
Okay.
Which was not always in tune with everybody around us, especially when I was living in Wichita.
Sure.
And so
how did that manifest when you say you grew up in a liberal household? In what ways were you liberal?
Just social justice was something that was incredibly important to my parents. It was something that we learned about from a very early age. It was something that is sort of one of my guiding values. And sort of sticking up for the little guy was something that my dad always believed in and always sort of instilled in us as like a core value. And so, if we would see injustice in the world, it was on us to help fix it. And that was something that was, just sort of like, obvious to me growing up, because it was such a part of who he was and who, we all should be, of course. And my dad did a lot of things that were perhaps not so popular in more conservative areas.
Okay.
In school districts.
Like what?
Like more inclusion programs and things like that.
Ahead of his time, it sounds like.
Truly.
Yeah.
And it was always very important to him to stick up for the children, which you would not think is particularly, polarizing, but, did not always endear him to other stakeholders.
Okay.
And so that was something that was just like, of course, that's what you do, whether it makes you popular or, or not, that's a really important thing to do. And so that's something he instilled in me. And then when I went off to college, I went to NYU for undergrad. And I ended up majoring in psychology. And it was very much of that sort of, how can I help? Who can I help? How can I help the most people? So that's how I got into that area.
What made you attend NYU?
Just absolute stubbornness.
About what?
I went and I visited a lot of colleges, and NYU just really resonated with me. I've had something throughout my life where I can be very indecisive about a lot of things, but really big life choices. There's always been something that felt very right. And NYU felt like it was my place. New York City at that time very much felt like it was my place. And that's where I was meant to be. And so I went there, and I just really fell in love with the city. I wanted to go to a good school. I wanted to have, access to the kind of education I could achieve there. But I also really, really just wanted to live in New York City and live that life.
That must have been so fun.
And it was amazing.
What was like a significant memory from living in New York City?
I was a bit of a raver in the 90s.
Okay.
And so we went out.
Alone.
What's that?
I said you weren't alone.
Yeah.
Were you a raver in the 90s?
I did some raving in the 90s.
It was the thing.
hilarious.
And so, I went out a lot in the city. And in fact, I would say, especially my first couple of years at school, most of my friends didn't even go to NYU. They were people I met. And then I ended up having a very long-term relationship with someone who was serving at a high-end restaurant, and who was studying to be a sommelier. And so then we would go, and we had all these friends in every corner of the city, and
Awesome.
who worked, and who would then let us in. And, just getting to meet so many different people, it's something I don't want to say I took it for granted, but being able to have exposures to so many different kinds of people, and you could go out and meet, 20, 30, 40 people a night and have like real conversations with them. And I love that openness. I love, this was a different time. It was the late 90s, very early aughts. And people were the city was thriving. Everybody that I met was very excited to meet new people and to learn new things. And it was magical. It was really magical time.
I saw Shireen just turn her head when you said the word aughts. Is that what caused that?
Yes.
Why?
No, it's just I keep hearing that lately, and I never heard it until like 3 weeks ago. And now everyone around me keeps saying aughts.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. No, you're
the early 2000s is what I meant to say.
Isn't that funny though?
Is that a new thing? The aughts, or has everyone been saying this for a long time?
We've been saying it for a couple decades.
I've missed it. I've missed it all along.
just a couple.
Okay, well, I'm just catching on.
That's funny.
I love to hear all these your perspective on living in New York City and going to school, undergrad in New York City after living in some of the areas you've lived in.
Yeah.
Because I think about it with our daughter, just living in Malibu and growing up in Malibu. I want her to go out and experience New York City, like specifically, or at least just other parts of the world in parts of the country where she can meet people from all different walks of life.
Yeah.
That happens in LA, but it doesn't necessarily happen in Malibu so much. And I just think New York City is just such a fascinating place to spend those few years. It's
something I've been searching for ever since then.
Yeah.
Is that level. I mean, it's sort of bar none, right? New York City is pretty much the epitome of that. And
San Francisco too, though.
San Francisco as well, but not to the same extent. And where we live now, we live in Marin County. I love the area. I love our neighbors are incredible people, but there is less diversity.
Marin almost feels like the Malibu of San Francisco.
It does. Somebody just said that to me the other day, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that my kids are growing up where they are, but I do want to make sure that they have a little bit more exposure.
Right.
When I was a kid, even living in Wichita, I was bused to a school because they had a G&T program in, a more urban area than where we lived. And so there was a lot more diversity in that school. I ended up, when I was 4th or 5th grade, I was tutoring an ESL student who was, like a kindergartner.
Yeah.
And, there was a lot more exposure to people who didn't have the same lifestyle as me. And it's something I think about a lot for my kids.
Yeah.
That I want them to understand that their sort of frame of reference is not the only frame of reference. And I think it's really important. It's something that my parents gave me in spades because we traveled so much when I was a kid. We traveled all over the country. We traveled internationally. It was a really big part of life, right? Was how important it is to travel and get out and see things.
You, when you were in New York City, which has a vibrant arts community, and you have this background in theater, and you were an artsy kid, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But you studied psychology at NYU. Did you continue with the arts at all during that time period, or what led to the pivot to psychology and then eventually the law?
So it's actually very interesting, right? I ended up going to NYU, which the Tisch School of Arts, it's one of the best,
right.
Theater schools in the country. I had, toward the end of my high school career, really shifted more into the tech, part of theater. I found, and it's funny because I ended up in the law. I didn't love, and this is my perspective as a teenager, I didn't love how much you had to be your own cheerleader, because you're going to constantly face rejection, and you have to be Teflon, right? You have
Absolutely.
to be Kevlar, and that leads to a certain frame of reference. I say this knowing full well now that I do that your sister is an actress, right? But this can lead
right.
to a certain self-centered is not the right word. You have to be so strongly in your own corner. And I started to have a real resistance to that.
Okay.
As I progressed, and I thought, you know what, even if I don't know that that's going to be me. Right. And I think I'd rather be in an industry that's a little bit more cooperative, and where
litigation.
like litigation. Yeah. But exactly. I mean, that was my thought process.
Yeah.
Right. Is like, I want to be in a place where, I would have successes and I would see my friends just a little bit grimace, right, when I was in theater. And I that really started to turn me off. I wanted to be in a different environment. And I don't say that to knock people who are in theater, because I think it's a fantastic artistic endeavor. I think it can also be an incredible community builder. Like I said, it was for me as a kid. And I think especially because I did a lot of theater, I understood what it was like to build that kind of a bond like you do with a cast. But I just found myself gravitating away to that and sort of more interested in other things.
So why the law? Why law school?
So in school, I studied psychology, and then I actually ended up double majoring in sociology. In psychology, I ended up being a research scientist. I worked in a visual perception research lab at NYU. I was a TA, and I, helped run the lab for an incredibly talented professor named Dennis Pelly. Dennis Pelly is sort of revolutionary. He is from Argentina, and he has built a practice that really looks at the arts and what the arts can teach us. And so that is actually how I sort of continued in that interest. And so we did a lot of work that was sort of premised on the work of different artists. And what I found is that I loved the work. I loved the discovery. I hated the statistics. And so I thought, this may not be for me.
I hated stats too.
I was like, you really need to own that part of and I again looked around a little bit, and I was thinking maybe academia is not exactly the place for me. But as I said, I double majored in sociology. And one of the things that I developed as sort of a principle was that people are the same everywhere, but a lot of what determines the how people's lives are led are the legal structures. Right. And so we would study how the legal structures influence society and really shaped it. And so that became something I was really passionate about. And so despite having to, eat my words a little bit and say, okay, I want to go to law school, even though I've said I'll never want to be in the law. I really wanted to go to law school. I wanted to work in public policy. I thought it was so important to do that, to be able to help as many people as possible.
Professor Pelli, being from Argentina, I mean, Lionel Messi's about to take the pitch right now against Spain. So in the World Cup, I'm sure he's got his jersey on.
Yeah.
Would you guess? I'm probably so. You've mentioned a few people. You've mentioned your family and your parents, your siblings, some professors. When you think back to your childhood, who are the mentors that stick out? Who did you have any childhood heroes?
Shira, Princess of Power, obviously. You know, I think my mom was really a hero of mine. She, to this day, I don't know how she did everything that she did. She was a professional. She had her own business. She worked, 40 to 60 hours a week, but out of the home. And she was an incredible mom to a huge family. And what I didn't know when I was much younger, but as I learned as I grew older, is that my parents had wanted to have like a dozen kids. And my mom had come from, my brothers and sisters mostly came from a previous marriage of hers, with someone who had been very alcoholic, who she had, left and took her kids when she was very young and had 3 kids, I think they were 1, 2, or 1, 3, and 4.
Wow.
And she went off on her own. She was a journalist. She worked for the news. That's how she met my dad. She was covering a school board meeting, and she just did it on her own in the 70s, and just absolutely dominated. My eldest brother, David, was adopted. They had a bunch of foster kids, and he was one of the foster kids that they adopted. I didn't know any of this until I was about 9. And just watching my mom do the things she did, and watching my dad and his real love and the way that he would stick up for children. Even when he ended up leaving, no longer being a superintendent, and he started his own alternative school business. And then he opened his own law practice. Primarily, the idea of it was to represent juveniles who, were not being treated properly. And so both of my parents really have just shown so much individual fortitude and so much belief in the values that I was raised with, that it's always been something that was very impressive and sort of, shaped who I am.
That is so impressive. Good on your mom to be able to get through that time period and raise an amazing family. And that's quite something.
And, in the 80s in Wichita, Kansas, a lot of moms did not work, right? But my mom was, she was running her own business. She was like doing it. And she's always been so impressive in that way.
Yeah, she sounds like a badass like her daughter.
I'll take it.
So where did you go to law school, and what was that like?
So I went to law school. I went to Northwestern. I loved it. A lot of similarities between the way that NYU and Northwestern are as institutions, sort of how they're aligned. And so Northwestern is in Chicago,
right?
Which, was a big adjustment for me. And
did it feel different than New York City?
Very different.
How so?
It's crazy to say, but it's a very different city. Chicago is very neighborhoods based. And, it's, it's just a very, very different place.
It is a different vibe. I've spent a lot of time in Chicago, having grown up in Michigan.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Even though it's a big city,
it's
nothing like New York, right?
Yeah. And so when I was a kid, we actually used to go to Chicago all the time, and I'd be like, this big city. And then, I'm 23, moving from New York City to Chicago, and I'm like, oh, this is where's the rest of the city?
Right.
And you can imagine that was not a popular point of view.
Right.
But it was kind of amazing in its own right too, because as I said, I loved going out. I loved, I very much appreciated music, and I could go, and there were all of the same shows that I couldn't get into because I couldn't afford to go to them in New York City. They're playing at a local bar. There's this incredible music scene in Chicago,
Right,
which I loved. But I will say it was a little difficult. I had trouble getting my law school classmates to go out with me.
Really?
Yeah.
High achievers.
Well, they'd be like, it's cold out.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be, it's going to be cold. I think it would be a little bit different if you lived in Chicago and you're there with people who were not, a lot of my law school classmates were transplants. And so they were there to study. And that's, it was a huge adjustment in terms of weather. I'm sure you can understand that, having grown up in Michigan.
For sure.
And yeah, but it was great. I think I met some of the really important people in my life still today. I met in law school, and I developed a love of negotiations and mediations. I ended up mediating for Cook County as part of an independent study. I got certified to be a mediator, and I mediated for a whole semester.
Like landlord-tenant stuff, things like that?
It was some landlord-tenant stuff. We did things for small claims court, primarily. There was also some family disputes. And we would also do some things for criminal disputes. If there was like a victim who that was some aspect of reaching a deal, would be some sort of reconciliation. So that was an amazing experience for me. It really got me out doing, rather than just studying, it got me out doing.
Sure. Actually applying the law to some practice.
Yeah. And I loved it. I really did. I had some of the, best teachers that I could ever have hoped for. And I also got very involved in what ultimately brought me to California, which is that I got very involved in prisoners' rights work.
Interesting. What were you doing there?
So Illinois had a program called the C number program. And essentially, at a certain time, the state shifted over to set sentencing. But prior to that, they had unset sentencing, but you were entitled to parole. You would get regular parole hearings. So they went from having, 100-year sentence or something to, okay, it's going to be this set amount. And nobody at the time that they made the shift, nobody could really properly counsel the prisoners on which would be better. And so a lot of people ended up getting grandfathered in because they were like, well, I'm eligible for parole in another year. I don't want to take a set sentence now, because I might be in for longer. As it turned out, it ended up working the opposite direction, because the parole, after this had been in place for a while, the parole board let someone out who ended up going on a crime spree.
Okay.
And so then it became
not good.
Very, very difficult for C number inmates to get parole. And so people ended up serving much, much longer than they ever would have been serving had they taken the set sentence, and much longer than they, most people would have under the prior system as well. And so what I ended up doing was I helped draft a petition. I went and I met with a parole candidate's family, friends. I helped draft a petition and help represent him in seeking parole. I did it for the same prisoner 2 years in a row. And on the second year, I ended up helping him get paroled.
What was that like when you were able to achieve that for this person?
It just felt like it was sort of the culmination of everything that I had been building towards, which was that I wanted to help someone. I wanted to have an impact on the world, and make it, if I could, a little bit more fair. That's really what I was looking for.
So those themes that you just touched on, as part of this, formative experience while in law school, it seems like it's translated to what it is that you do every day here at our firm. Let's connect those 2 points in time.
Sure.
How did you graduate law school? What was your first job out of law school?
So I worked at a large defense firm called Bingham McCutcheon.
Yep. It's familiar. That's big law.
Big law. Yeah. In San Francisco. It's no longer in operation, unfortunately, but it was a very, very well-respected firm at the time. It had just formed from the merger of McCutcheon Daly, which is a huge, well-respected San Francisco firm, and Bingham, which was a Boston firm, much more corporate, sort of. And so very different firms, but they had merged just a few years before I started there.
Okay.
And the office that I worked in was still very much McCutcheon focused.
Okay.
And it was a very, for big law, a very horizontal hierarchy. And they had a huge focus on pro bono work. And so,
is that something that attracted you to that firm?
Which is why I wanted to go there more than anything else. That was a huge draw for me, because I wanted to continue doing prisoners' rights work. I thought it was really important. I continue to think it's incredibly important for us to show as a society that everyone, no matter what, is treated fairly, and that the law applies this to every one of us. And in a fair way. And I think that's really, really important. It was sort of it was my driving force.
You continued to do some pro bono prisoners' rights work at Bingham McCutcheon?
I did.
And then how long were you at Bingham, and then where did your career go from there?
So I was at Bingham for about 6 years. And there were some shifts in the management of the firm. When I started there, pro bono was counted equally to billable work, which is quite revolutionary. I think most people would agree. That's not typically the way it is for most big law firms.
And now that's more of a norm, at least with some portion of an allotment, right?
But you could do all pro bono.
Okay.
That when I started.
Oh yeah, that's different.
Yeah, which was very, very much not the norm for obvious financial reasons.
Is that why Bingham McCutcheon is no longer in? But no.
But it was,
model.
I ended up doing a huge amount of pro bono work, but we actually it ended up being per consent decree. The state had to reimburse for it, so it ended up being pretty lucrative for the firm. A lot of the work that I did, but it was just a change in focus.
Okay,
and so I ended up. Over one thing or another, getting very involved in antitrust law. And as I saw the ability for me to do prisoners' rights work to balance out the antitrust sort of being eroded, my passion started to fade, right? Antitrust work is incredibly difficult. It's very intellectually challenging. It's incredible work. Some of the best attorneys, I know work in that field, but it didn't drive my passion in the same way. And I found myself working these really crazy hours, as you do, and feeling like it wasn't being spent on something that I had a real passion for. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I was pretty sure I didn't want to do that.
I don't sense any cross-team collaborations with our antitrust partner, Derek Brandt, on the horizon.
That is one of my favorite teams, I have to say. I would
people-wise
happily do some collaboration, but maybe continue to have them work on my case.
Actually, he's got some really exciting, cool cases that, you never know.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So I didn't realize that you had an antitrust background.
Yes.
So take us from that point forward.
So I just decided that I needed to just go all in, and I needed to focus on plaintiff side work, because that was clearly that was what got me wanting to get up in the morning and do this kind of work. And so I made the shift to plaintiff side work. I started working with a young man who had just started his own firm at the time, who I was introduced to by a friend. And he was this very idealistic, very strong lawyer who had worked at the ACLU, who had argued in front of the Supreme Court, and just sort of like blew me away in wanting to do the same kinds of things I wanted to do, which was primarily being focused on constitutional law. So I started working for his newly formed firm of Wolf Legal.
Okay. And this is
Adam Wolf.
Okay.
And so we worked together, and then his firm ended up merging with a law firm that was based in New Orleans, run by another wonderful attorney, Joe Pfeiffer, and that formed Pfeiffer Wolf. I was with Wolf Legal and then Pfeiffer Wolf for over a decade.
Adam Wolf's a fellow Michigan Wolverine.
He is. He is.
Go blue.
He will tell you that every chance he gets.
Well, that's what we tend to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shireen,
Go blue.
Shireen hates when I see someone with a Block M hat walking down the street, and I give them a go blue.
Well, they often give it to each other. It's a whole thing. Go blue. Go blue.
Adam Wolf has children. I have a conspiracy theory that it was only so that he could buy the Michigan onesies and various, you know.
Oh, he's got all that for the kids.
Yeah.
I had a little. Didn't I have a little cheerleader uniform for Adia when she was just a baby?
Yes. No, that was for Michigan State.
No, it was Michigan. It was the blue and
because Ryan went to both Michigan State and University of Michigan.
I think I had one of each. The indoctrination starts early when you're a proud member of.
It's very intense.
You know, an alumni base.
Oh, I mean, counsel on my team.
Yeah.
Ashley Washington.
Oh yeah. She's Michigan as well.
Yeah.
Let's just pause there for a moment. With NYU and Northwestern as your pedigree, are you it's a Northwestern Wildcats, right?
I literally do not care. I'm so
You don't care. Okay.
I'm not a sports.
You're
I'm
not a
sports
person.
girl.
Okay.
Sports ball. Yay.
Sports ball.
I'm sorry. I apologize to everyone.
You don't have to apologize. That resonates with
I am
very
just,
well.
I enjoy the sports ball when I am in the home of the sports ball. But aside from that, I am not following the sports ball.
What did you do at Pfeiffer Wolf?
So at Pfeiffer Wolf, we did so I started out doing primarily constitutional law, right? Which it had that had always been my interest from the prisoners' rights work, primarily constitutional law. Adam and I worked on a lot of cases that were sort of tangentially related to the war on drugs and how the war on drugs was interfering with people's constitutional rights. So school strip search cases, medical marijuana cases where, they were sharing people's private information, drug testing cases where they were testing for things that they were not allowed to test for, those sorts of things.
So you're representing a lot of students?
We were representing
or teenagers, or
we did represent some minors who were school strip searched. We were, it was sort of all over the board,
which is interesting, right?
I imagine
the congruency between what you were doing at this point in your career, the parallelism with your father, right?
Yeah,
and his influence. Did you ever think about that?
I didn't.
Yeah, it's interesting though, right?
But it is. It's very yes.
It seems obvious, but maybe it was just part of your path. It was meant to be. And
but I do think that, we got to work on cases that were really meaningful to me. And that's probably why, right? It's sort of all in a line. And there's been a lot of times in my life where I've looked back and said, oh, well, of course I like to litigate. I have a theater background. What is court if not a stage, right?
Absolutely. Do you feel like your background in theater helps you as a litigator?
Enormously.
Yeah. As a storyteller, perhaps?
Enormously. Not just as a storyteller and not just as, doing oral argument, but also in understanding what my clients' experiences, what their motivations may be, what their end goals may be, because it's not always obvious. And you need to, as a lawyer, you need to craft your strategy and your approach to match what their, desired end goals are. And sometimes they don't know them. And so being able to sort of, have that, draw on that history of getting into character, where you're really thinking through, okay, what are my characters' motivations? What do they want? What are their goals? And being able to then translate that to my relationship with my client and asking them those questions and getting them to think of those things so that I can then be a better advocate. That has been immensely helpful. I think it was helpful. I think that in some level, my psychology background is helpful in that, but I would say theater, especially because I studied it for so much longer, right? From childhood, has been even more helpful in really helping me try and get into the mindset and understand what opposing counsel may be trying to accomplish, what their clients may be thinking. Theater's been incredibly helpful in all of those regards.
It's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think, especially with the kind of work that you do, which we'll get into your current work now soon, the idea of empathy, that the amount of empathy you have to have in order to do what you do and serve the clients that you currently serve.
Yeah.
And how theater could sort of help with that skill. Or that ability.
I don't think it's something that people necessarily think about when they think about theater, but any actor or actress will tell you that getting into somebody else's shoes.
Yes.
Which is, I think I think about, I've said it like multiple times over the course of our conversation. That's always been something that was really important to me to understand. And that's always been something that's been incredibly helpful to me in everything I've done. And I think theater really helped me build that skill.
Yeah.
I didn't even really think about that connection, but I'm glad you actually expressly stated it, because it really connected the dots for me. And that makes perfect sense, because that's exactly what an actor has to do.
Mm-hmm.
Put themselves in the shoes of the character that they are portraying, right? Yeah, that's really good.
And you might never have had this particular experience, right? That your character has had.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to try and feel it. And in order to try and feel it, you have to be able to have an empathetic connection with somebody who is very different than you.
And I imagine that, having, been a theater person for so long, after a while it becomes natural, because it's one thing to put yourself in the shoes of someone, but to actually be able to connect in an authentic way actually is what is compelling.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what you're talking about.
And I think it's really what has driven me, that part, which I didn't always recognize. But that part of me is so important to the core of who I am. I think it's what's drawn me to all of the different things that I've done in life. Right.
Yeah. Now is a perfect time, I think, to get into, some of how you can bring that to bear in the work that you do today, because I think what you do, not everyone can do. Most people cannot do it. And certainly to the extent they can do it, they cannot do it as effectively as you can. And I think that's probably a big reason for it. But, Shireen, where do you want to go with Tracey here?
Yeah. I'm excited to get into your current role and talk about your work. So, and I think you were almost there with your story.
I was.
So, you run our sexual assault and fertility negligence practice areas. And so I want to hear about how what led you to those specific practice areas.
So I started in fertility first. I was at my former firm, and we had a opposing counsel approached us and said, I represent this company. One of their VPs has had a loss involving her embryos that were stored and that were destroyed. I recommended that she reach out to you guys because I think that you're good plaintiff's attorneys, which is I one of the best compliments you can get. And so that was the first case that I ever had involving fertility negligence. And at the time, there was no law about what sorts of duties a clinic had in storing embryos, storing eggs. In fact, it was brand new that fertility clinics were even offering IVF, in vitro fertilization services to the public, except for people who had experienced, who were going through cancer treatment. It had previously only been offered to people who were going through cancer treatment, and it had just started being offered to others. And so it was a brand new industry, really no law in the books whatsoever. And what we confronted was, well, is it medical malpractice? Is it not medical malpractice? There's a lot of defenses to medical malpractice, but it doesn't really exactly feel like medical malpractice. And so what do we do? And so I used that first case and really came up with what ended up being sort of my approach to these cases. And it was something that I felt just, again, immediately bonded to as a subject matter. It was something that I found incredibly compelling. It was something that was life-changing. And it was something that I thought there needs to be law. There needs to be a recognition. Something we see all the time in the law is that technology outpaces the law. And this was one of these situations where I was really just a absolutely blank slate as to how it could go. And it could go very badly for people, or it could go, very well. And so I started working in this area of law, became one of the, very few people, still to this day, who are doing fertility negligence cases. I primarily concentrate on cases where people's eggs or embryos have been mishandled, have been damaged, have been lost, destroyed, have been put in the wrong people sometimes, have been created with the wrong people's sperm. So I really focus on that type of law, not just all medical malpractice involving fertility treatments, but really focused on the damage and the destruction or the misuse of primarily eggs and embryos. And that's sort of my focus. I don't consider a lot of that to be medical malpractice, and oftentimes it's not. Some of the biggest cases that I've ever done in my career have been product liability cases, where a manufacturer created a product that they knowingly put in the stream of commerce to be used in fertility clinics, and did not take the proper precautions. And then that ended up in the destruction or damage of people's eggs and embryos. And people's eggs and embryos occupy this bizarre area of the law where they're quasi property, but they're also people's absolute hopes and dreams. And they're irreplaceable every single time. And so it ended up being something that I really resonated with. And I, had some of my own fertility struggles after I started in this area of law. So I really felt like I could connect with the experience of my clients. And it ended up being an area that I could provide a service to my clients that I don't think necessarily they could find elsewhere, which was I was going to know everything there was to know about the IVF process so that I could educate others. I was going to approach it in a way that was not, sort of going to automatically fall into other causes of action, but that I was also going to be very, very client focused. And that's been something that I have really, since we started in that practice area, really found to be what I consider to be my superpower, and certainly what gives me the greatest, joy and the most reward in the practice of law is being able to be client focused from the beginning and be there with them through this process and provide them somebody who they can feel like is on their team.
I couldn't agree more. I see you that way as well. I mean, before you came to our firm and started really building out this practice area, I wasn't very familiar with fertility negligence, right? And so I'm sort of learning in this moment from you that it's just because it's really a newer area a newer area of liability that's developing and that you're at the forefront of. Okay. And do you think that you just explained the types of cases that you do in that realm? Does that cover the gamut essentially of the type of fertility negligence, as we call it, the type of cases that you cover?
Yeah. So it's primarily at the clinic level, it may be that a clinic has lost, damaged, or mistakenly destroyed a client's eggs or embryos, sometimes sperm, particularly if it's a client who has an inability to obtain more sperm or had to have sperm surgically retrieved. That's also a huge loss, or if they've gone through cancer treatment, for example. And then also, typically at the clinic level, you may have fertilization issues where they may have used the wrong person's sperm to fertilize somebody's eggs and create embryos. That can create problems like you wouldn't believe, because you end up having a child who is also somebody else's biological child, someone you've never met. And that can create custody issues and all kinds of, and what do you do with the embryos that haven't yet been used? I mean, you can imagine the ethical and the moral and the emotional fallout for something like that is incredible. I also have dealt with, unfortunately, cases where the wrong embryos were transferred into the wrong people. Again, absolutely heartbreaking. I've dealt with a number of different product liability cases or mishandling of equipment cases. And then I've also dealt with, I think the only one that I hadn't mentioned before was that I've dealt with this is primarily something that happened a long time ago, but people are now, through the use of commercial DNA tests, finding out that the wrong sperm was used in artificial insemination procedures, even many decades ago. So I've handled cases where doctors used their own sperm to inseminate their patients without their consent, where they've used donor sperm instead of using the husband's sperm. These types of things all sort of fall in my wheelhouse of the types of cases that I primarily handle. And I've handled some other cases as well, but those are the main sort of core fact patterns.
That has to be a jarring experience for people who have gone through that and have realized, at some point deep into their lives that up is down and left is right. And, it must feel quite topsy-turvy to have that kind of an experience unfold.
For everyone involved, and the thing that most people don't realize is that the children of in that situation typically do not have legal claims, because if not for the mistake, that person would not exist, which seems very wrong.
It does. Seems something awfully strange and unjust about that.
Yeah. And so it's one of these very strange questions that the law presents, which is, can you complain about your own birth? And so there are these bizarre areas of law. And again, most of them formed because of completely different types of cases that, are decades or more in the past. And so the law, as I say, is still really adjusting to fit our new reality and the new technology that we are able to use to great and incredible effect. By the way, I think the fertility industry is a remarkable thing. I think that they have opened doors for so many families and so many women. And it's a wonderful thing. But when you deal with life as part of your business, there are these long-reaching ramifications and consequences that the law is still very much catching up.
Just pausing on that that one point, because I think it's such an important point, and it's something that we talk a lot about on this pod, which is that technology is moving so fast across all aspects of society that the law has a real difficult job of keeping up with it.
It does.
And the obvious example is artificial intelligence. So AI, we talk about it a lot. We have a lot of work on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence technologies. But what you're describing in the biological realm and in the fertility realm in particular is, I mean, it's very true of that area as well. I mean, what's happening in biology, and some of this is actually being fostered by AI, right? Is that area is advancing dramatically in terms of what's possible. Right?
Yeah.
So, gosh, it's so interesting. We think about what you do as the intersection of kind of technology and I would call it special property.
Yes.
Right. So there's all kinds of different specialized, unique property.
Yeah.
Like biological material. So you mentioned sperm and eggs and embryos and blastocysts and tissues, etc. But I think that as we continue to evolve technologically, that's going to really dramatically change as well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I'll say is it's not just the intersection of technology and special property, but it's also bodily autonomy. And that is, for me, that's the thread that connects both of my practice areas, right? Because I do fertility negligence and I do sex assault. I represent sex assault survivors. And bodily autonomy is such a huge part of my fertility negligence practice. And I think it's one of the things that, again, is what is so, I'm very passionate about that subject. And it's also what helps me connect with my clients. And so, when we talk about the law lagging, for example, I've had cases where doctors used their own sperm, and I've had defense attorneys argue to me and to the courts that there was no crime, that there was nothing in the law that prevented that doctor from doing that. Now, that is a place where we see the law starting to catch up. In California, we have passed a law saying it is a crime, both criminally and there's a separate civil cause of action now to, put the wrong thing, to put sperm in someone's body without their permission for that specific sperm.
Is that akin, or does that arise out of concepts related to battery, a physical battery?
Yeah, I mean, it is, right? But under the law in California and most places, it's not a medical battery, for example, if you don't have the separate statute, because they did consent to have some sperm. And so we look at cases like this, and they're often called medical rape. But it's a little bit different because somebody has consented to have some sperm. And so the courts at times have struggled with this and said, well, there's no battery then because you did consent to something. But I think we all know if you put yourself in the same mindset, somebody could consent to be with one person. That doesn't mean that any person could be with them. And it's very much the same. And so California has recognized that, and they've said that it is a crime to place, any sperm into a woman's uterus without her explicit consent. And
seems obvious.
It seems obvious,
but yet it's rare, right?
But yet it really took a clarification of the law to make it explicitly clear, because we were having courts, and this is still a problem in other states where you can have a fact pattern like this that seems so obvious, but yet no cause of action for medical battery can exist, right? And so we all have sort of these concepts of, well, that's obviously that the law should be that, but is it? Not always, right? Not always if it hasn't caught up. And so I think that's one of the things that's been really interesting. And I've been doing this now for over a decade, and the law has developed in some good ways and some bad ways. But there's still a long way to go. And that's something that it's something that I'm very interested in and keeping an eye on, prior to 2021, there had never been a case where any jury had ever delivered a verdict on what was the value of destroying someone's embryos, what was the value of destroying someone's eggs. And then a case that I worked on, which was the Pacific Fertility Center case, went to trial in the Northern District of California. And a jury returned an enormous verdict. And until the verdict was delivered, I think defense counsel thought it was very possible that there would be that there would either be a defense verdict or there would be a verdict and zero damages, because no one knew what is a jury going to think.
And it probably felt intuitive to you on the plaintiff side team that, the jury would get it, but certainly there was a real risk that they might not, and the defense counsel may have had the correct perspective on what a jury might return.
So I think that case was really interesting. I was not part of the trial team because I was out on maternity leave, another one of life's terrible ironies. But I was talking to an attorney who I very much respect, who was on that trial team the other day, and she was saying, oh yeah, defense attorney was blindsided. And we were like, obviously this was what was going to happen. But I think it's unless and until you get a verdict, you don't necessarily know. We focus grouped that case multiple times.
So interesting how plaintiffs and defense lawyers value risk differently going into a trial when the stakes can be that high, right?
Yeah. It's not surprising that they see things different, that we see things differently, but
what I'm saying is it's surprising how different the risk analyses might, what the results of those risk analyses might actually be.
Yeah.
Such that they lead to a very high stakes trial. And it happens all the time. We know that it happens. But,
the defense attorney won, to be fair. The defense attorney billed
the attorney himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just the client.
Right.
Yes,
That's a different issue,
lost,
right?
Yeah.
They've got different motives, perhaps. I really liked how she put a nice through line between her two practices, and that through line being body autonomy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Touching on fertility negligence and connecting it to her representation of survivors.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of people say, oh, well, it's all women focused, right? You do fertility negligence, you do sex assault. I have a lot of male clients in both of my practice areas. And so I've had to really think about that, right? There are a lot of women that I represent, but it's not really, I have probably just as many clients who are men and just as many clients in both practices.
Well, the fertility both practice areas. Fertility negligence, you've got fathers who are just as affected as the mothers with some of these issues, or in different ways.
Yeah.
But they're certainly affected. And then same with the other practice. Can I ask you one question about the fertility negligence practice that I just think is interesting? And then I'd love to hear you talk about the sexual assault practice. Fertility negligence, I just think this is so interesting. So going back to the cases where either the doctors mishandled or misused or did something they weren't supposed to do, how from an evidence perspective, how are people even discovering this across your clients? And what type of evidence do you need to be able to be successful with those cases?
So it's very much a problem because oftentimes the doctors either need to admit it, say, we dropped they dropped the Petri dish in the embryology lab or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or there needs to be some, something very, very obvious like a DNA test, right? I have people call me all the time who, not all the time, but more frequently than I think should happen, where they say, we did a DNA test and our kid is not our kid. Or we did a DNA test and our kid is only related to one of us. And I think that a lot of the time that happens, it doesn't get caught. It really typically is because somebody has noticed that their child looks very different.
Yeah.
I had one client, one couple who they happened to have been in the NICU. They watched a Lifetime movie about switched at birth, and they were like, haha, we should do a test. And that's how they found out.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah. And, somebody who they're both very dark haired, their child has very bright red hair. And they, like at a certain point, they're like,
did your uncle happen to be a red?
yeah. And that's how most of my clients in that area, that's how most of them have discovered it, because either they had a child who was of a different race or just looked very, very different than they were expecting. And sometimes it takes a while to really come to grips with that. And
it's got to be heartbreaking. I mean, I can't even imagine, being
it's
having that news just broken to you.
And so you have objective proof in those cases.
Right.
In cases where they have lost the embryos, that's, again, they've contacted the clinic to try and use them.
Right.
And they're no longer there. In cases where they've dropped, damaged, etc., oftentimes you'll never know unless they tell you. And what my clients are told all the time when they have a bad result, this happened with our recent, huge lawsuits where people all over the country and in fact all over the world were having their cycles damaged by a bad product. Almost all of those clients were initially told, well, you just have bad eggs. You just have bad sperm. Sometimes that happens. And so initially, even though it was later discovered that this was tied to a bad product, initially all of them were told, well, it's just your fault. In slightly different, but no less devastating terms.
Yeah.
And no way to cross-examine that. No way to question it. You just something that you have to take at face value.
Yeah.
And people do, and they think they're the problem. And it has to become a total psychological harm.
It destroys people.
Right? Yeah, it does.
There are a lot of people who we represent in that more recent group of cases who said, we were done. We were never going to do it again because, we couldn't deal with that loss again and blame myself. I've seen marriages break up over things like this. Right. And then, or they're like, well, let's just do another cycle. And then they put their bodies through
And let's name that. Let's just talk about that particular case. You're referring to our Cooper cases.
I am. I'm referring to the cases involving a bad product that was manufactured by CooperSurgical, which is a very well-known company that manufactures supplies used by fertility clinics.
And just share the allegations of that and, kind of the nature of the case.
Sure. So that case grew out of when you do in vitro fertilization, there is what that entails is that the fertility doctor will retrieve eggs from the woman, from female, and in the embryology lab, they'll put them in a petri dish, in a solution, in a little bit of liquid. And they will fertilize them with the intended sperm. And they then sit in an incubator for 5 to 7 days. And if successful, that fertilized egg will develop to a blastocyst. And blastocyst is just a certain development of an embryo. The little bit of liquid that's in the petri dish is called culture media. And that's because the embryo is culturing. That's the name of that scientific process or biological process. And the culture media is meant to mimic the environment of a woman's womb. So it's very nutrient rich. It's got a lot of different salts and different ingredients in it that are meant to support the development of life, that are meant to support embryonic development. And just like any other physical process, in order to develop properly, an embryo needs food. right? So it's drawing on the nutrients in that liquid to help fuel the development. Unfortunately, in 2023, CooperSurgical developed manufactured a batch of this liquid that was missing a crucial component, which is the chemical magnesium. Or element actually of magnesium. And magnesium, as any woman who's gone through pregnancy will tell you, we're constantly being told it's so important. People take baths with magnesium salts. It's very, very important to embryonic development and early childhood development, fetal development. So it's one of these things that is really needed. And as a result of not having magnesium, what happened was, when fertility clinics started using this media, they would have this great result. They retrieved all these eggs. They had this great result in fertilization. They had all these fertilized eggs. And then for many of them, right around day 3 of the 5 to 7 day development process, all the embryos would just stop developing. And they couldn't figure it out. And a lot of people got absolutely no usable embryos because none of them developed past that stage. Or some people got a few, but they took longer to develop and they weren't as high quality as you otherwise would expect. And this was happening on an enormous scale all across the country. And some embryologists and some fertility clinics reached out to CooperSurgical and said, something's wrong, right? If you have one bad fertility cycle from one couple, you may never know why it went wrong. It really might be because they don't have compatible sperm and eggs. It really may be that the woman's eggs are not of a quality that can support, strong development of embryos. But if you have it happening in such a way that there's a complete statistical anomaly, then clinics can say there is a problem. And that's what they did. And they reported it to the company. And then there was a recall. And, and then people around the country were notified after the fact, because most of them had already been told your cycle was almost a complete loss, or we only got one embryo, or whatever it might have been. This was the reason. It wasn't your fault. This is the reason.
That is just an incredibly tragic story and circumstance, and this affected hundreds of households, of couples around the country and around the world, right?
Yes. I believe CooperSurgical has released in their own financial documents something like, was it 1,500 claims? 1,500 claims that they received.
And you and our firm represented a large portion of that.
Yeah, number. We represented 132 households. So, around about 250 people who had been, had their cycles either completely destroyed or very much compromised by this. There were some people who did have children, very few. So for the vast majority of people, even if they did obtain embryos, they did not obtain nearly as many as they would have. Most of those embryos were, if they were used in transfers, the transfers trying to transfer into a uterus, right, to try and start a pregnancy. Most of those failed or ended in miscarriage, which is, both of those things are their own absolute horrible traumas. A very small percentage resulted in births. And of those, a much higher than we would have expected percentage, at least from what I saw, resulted in some level of birth defect or birth complication.
Can you share a little bit about the damages? What is it that people are experiencing and then seeking justice for having endured in cases like this?
Yeah. So, I think it's really, again, I could talk about this all day. And one of the things that I think people don't necessarily realize if they haven't been through it themselves is that going through a fertility cycle, an IVF cycle, is incredibly hard. It is not easy. It is not like, for most people, it's not, for the woman involved, it's almost never very easy at all. It's not like giving a sperm sample. It's an invasive surgical procedure, and they have to prepare their bodies for weeks of, daily or near daily visits to have their hormone levels checked. Oftentimes they have to have many surgical procedures to prepare the uterus to give the best chance possible. They take hormones up to as many as 5 needles, injections a day. Typically they're completely bruised all over their bodies. The hormones are very difficult on their emotions. They can lead to huge weight fluctuations. They increase the risk for cancer and other very serious side effects. And those are not just like the side effects. These things actually happen. And they do all of this oftentimes, usually while working. It's a very disruptive thing, and it really throws your emotions all over the place. And then they have very invasive surgical procedure to retrieve the eggs. And what they do is they hyperstimulate the body to produce more eggs than it would normally. Normally, a woman's body only produces 1 egg at a time. But they hyperstimulate it, and that can lead to all kinds of side effects. And oftentimes people land in the hospital after the egg retrieval. And then to have that taken away, the damage of that is not just you went through all of that, right? It's that each one of those embryos is unique. They've lost the chance. Every single egg, every woman is born with as many eggs as they'll ever have. And once they're gone, they're gone. And so it's not every single one of those embryos was a potential child. And so not only are they dealing with the grief of, completely having ravaged oftentimes their finances, their bodies, and oftentimes their work, they've had to take a lot of time off work, but every single one of those embryos could have been a child. And any parent will tell you that having another child does not supplant the loss of losing a child. And so for most of my clients, they really do think of those embryos as their children. And to know that they were damaged or destroyed through no fault of their own after they've done everything to choose, the best clinic possible, it's an incredibly awful and devastating loss. It's grief.
How does that manifest? How does that loss manifest in terms of the experience to the couple losing that embryo or blastocyst? Or
I've seen it all over the board. I've seen some couples get closer. I've seen a lot of couples whose marriages have very, very strongly suffered. I've had couples who divorced over losses like this. And, for the parents, especially initially being told it was their fault, the self-blame is incredible. And then you compound that with, if you're going to try again, you have to do another cycle with all of the attendant risks and physical ordeal that we already talked about. Oftentimes people can't afford it. And because all women have a very, very, very limited fertile window, a lot of times people cannot even attempt it again because they've already aged out, right? It's a very limited time frame. In any fertility doctor will tell you every month matters. So even finding out, a month after, 2 months after the fact, your picture may be very different if the woman is, say, over the age of 35.
And then the emotional toll, what does that typically look like?
I think it's like anything else. Everybody deals with grief differently, but we've dealt with clients who've lost their jobs over their grief, who, are in and going to be in therapy for years. It's something that strikes at who we are, right? The desire, I know I can say this to you, you're both parents. The desire to be parents is something that is just absolutely integral to who we are as people. Many people have grown up their entire lives with the assumption that they would get to be parents. And to have that taken away and then to have hope for it and then have that taken away again, it's an incredible loss.
So these cases recently resolved after years of litigation. And I'd say that the litigation team led by you, and you just did a phenomenal job, Tracey, delivered an unparalleled, groundbreaking result to all of the families we represented. And talk to us a little bit about, I mean, this settled on the eve of trial. We had a couple of these cases ready to go to trial. So we pushed it to the very end before serving a result that is, I think, all of the clients and we are all very proud of, and that will be life-changing for so many. Talk to us a little bit about, the ability to deliver justice for our clients in a case of this kind of emotion, and what it's like to kind of reclaim one's power and voice, et cetera, in a case like this.
We've had a really, I always say I have the best clients, right? We've had incredible clients. Clarkson has incredible clients. We've had a really incredible response. Certainly I wish it could have come sooner, right? But I think our clients are very pleased with the outcome, particularly because it has given them that voice. A lot of them feel like they have finally, nothing can undo what was done. Absolutely nothing. There's no amount of money that will ever make that right. But I think the magnitude of the outcome has really helped our clients in their healing process, because they feel like there's accountability, right? And that more than anything has been so important, that there be accountability. And, because of the nature of our system and our world, that's really how you hold companies to account. And so I think that has been remarkably healing for our clients. And we've heard that from them over and over again, that they feel like they finally have been heard, and that they feel like what was done to them has been acknowledged. What was taken away from them was acknowledged, even if it can never be made, even if they can never be made right in the sense of turning them back to where they were before this happened. At least it has been acknowledged, and they feel like that gives them a great sense of personal dignity back. And that's something that, again, with both of my practice areas, that's what I'm always trying to deliver, is that sense of personal dignity and returning that to our clients.
Is this a highlight of your career, would you say?
Without doubt, without question. It's still sort of, it's still sort of crystallizing for me. And I've been a wreck, through this whole process, because the weight, I'm so lucky, and we're so lucky. And you guys were both my partners on these cases, in every sense of the word. But I'm so lucky, and we're so lucky to get to work on cases like this that have so much emotional meaning, but it's a huge weight, right? It's not, delivering for your clients when they've suffered something like this is just, there's such a weight to it. And there's such a sense of obligation and duty. And so being able to kind of shake it off and be like, oh, we did it. Which I really do. I think we did it. And being able to say that and kind of like de-stress has been a little bit of a process.
Yeah.
But it's a great feeling. It's just, what I've said for most of my clients is that hopefully this resolution is life-changing, because what was done to you was life-changing. And
so true.
I feel like it's also life-changing for me, right? To be able to for anybody who's done, sort of had an undertaking that consume them. And there's no question that this group of cases did. To come out the other end of it and feel really proud of the outcome, I think is a great feeling, and it's without a doubt a high point of my career.
So where do you go from here? I mean, what are you excited about as you look ahead? I mean, you're really at a mountain top, a peak moment, I'd say, just based on, what I know of your career and having worked with you. But the work's not over.
Yeah.
And, have you thought about what comes next and where you want to take your career?
Yeah. So it's interesting, even just the last couple of years, because I've been very vocal. I've spoken quite a bit in the media. I've spoken quite a bit in our various hearings. We worked on a chapter of a manual together. I've had a lot of practitioners reach out to me over the past few years who sought me out and asked for advice on similar cases, who, wanted to partner on similar cases. And that has been, I was talking about this at the beginning of our conversation, getting that sort of a feedback has been really delightful. It's been eye-opening. It's been a great privilege. And being able to sort of talk to others who are grappling with this problem and say, oh, I know exactly what you need to do, right? Like, that's an incredible place to reach in your career.
You're an authority.
And so, I don't want to puff up my chest a little bit too much, but I do think that I'm in a position where I can help guide this practice area, because it is still so new.
Sure.
And there's a lot of other great practitioners working alongside me, but there aren't very many of us, to be perfectly honest, who specialize in this type of work. And so being able to help guide the law and hopefully get the ear of legislators, because like I said, really the law needs to catch up with us. That's really the next sort of chapter for me. Is I want to make sure that we're still taking these cases, that where necessary, we're taking them to trial, because that's been a huge missing piece of all of this. And that we're talking to legislatures, that we're talking to, community groups and other stakeholders, and making this constellation of problems, right, more visible. Because I think, a lot of our clients have talked about going through a fertility loss as one of the most isolating things they've ever experienced. And the fact of the matter is, it's happening more and more.
Right.
And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. The industry is it's so profitable that these huge companies are investing, and they're running the companies, whether it's clinics or the equipment manufacturers, they're running them like businesses that create widgets, but they don't realize the long-term consequences. And so I want to continue to be vocal about these cases. I want to continue to shine a light on them. And I want the industry as a whole to be safer for everyone involved, because it's a wonderful thing that we have all these opportunities to build families, but it has to be safe. It can't just be private equity's next, mountain to conquer. It has to be done responsibly and safely. And so whatever I can do to help encourage that.
I think that sounds fantastic. And
I'm excited to see you do it.
A righteous cause for sure.
Can we switch gears for a second? Can you just talk a little bit about the sex assault practice and
Sure.
what types of cases you do? And I think for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the civil side of that, how is that different than the criminal side, which I think most people are more familiar with?
Yeah. So we also have a very big sex assault practice at Clarkson, and it falls primarily into two different portions, but the sort of unifying thing is that we bring litigation primarily against institutions, right? So businesses that are allowing unsafe conditions that result in sex assault, or institutions that for various different reasons, are meant to have the care of our clients top of, is sort of their top priority, and they allow things to befall them. So the way that this sort of breaks is, I have a huge part of Clarkson's sex assault practice is focused on rideshare. We represent both drivers who've been sexually assaulted during a ride by their passengers, and we represent passengers who've been sexually assaulted by the drivers. And those cases are very hotly contested. There's a lot of litigation, both at the state and the federal level, against the rideshare companies. That's been in the news a ton lately.
Can we pause there for one moment? Because if I'm listening to this and I'm not familiar with sexual assault cases against rideshare companies, and we're talking about Lyft and Uber, et cetera, I'm probably thinking, oh, this must be kind of a very rare one-off sort of thing. But can you talk a little bit about the prevalence of this? How often is this happening? How many clients are you and have you represented? Just so we can kind of level set on whether this is just a really rare thing or whether it's something that's a real risk that we see happen over and over and over again.
So it's a real risk. It's a real danger. It's something that, only in the last few years have the rideshare companies started releasing safety reports. My personal belief is that those safety reports wildly underreport. And they're very limited in the data that they report. But even their own reports reveal that this happens thousands of times a year on both platforms, right? And it happens, from what we know, just about as often to drivers as it does to passengers. And so it's very, very dangerous. The rideshare industry has opened up employment opportunities and transportation opportunities for a lot of different people in ways, like I said, that I think the fertility industry is also a fantastic industry. It's really remarkable what technology has made possible. However, the rideshare companies have led people to believe that this is very, very different than hitchhiking. And then when it comes down to it, when bad things happen, the rideshare companies are often like, well, you got in a stranger's car. That had nothing to do with me. Or you let a stranger get in your car. That was your decision. And so it's very, very jarring how these companies market themselves versus how they defend themselves in court. And so what we have seen is that there has been a wave of legislation, because there's huge lobbying arms to these companies, a wave of legislation that has pushed back people's protections. That may be in the form of Prop 22 in California, where drivers are no longer, even though under prior law they would have been, categorized as employees. People think that that's, it's because they don't want to pay minimum wage. That's part of it. But a huge part of it is because they don't want to be responsible when terrible things happen to their drivers and when their drivers do terrible things. And so, we are recently seeing additional legislation, even in the federal government, that would give these rideshare companies immunity for these types of damages. And that is a terrible thing.
And that's just from these companies, these huge, profitable corporations pouring money into the lobbying efforts.
And they're doing it because they know that they have this huge exposure. And what you see when you really dive into it is that these companies have been on notice of how frequent and prevalent the sexual assault problem is on their own platforms. They've known about it since the very beginning. They've known about it since, the teens, right? Like really, when these companies were first getting started, there were tons of reports of this, and they turned a blind eye. They also have run their own studies. They know what is required to prevent this problem, and it's dash cams. It's no secret. And they also
cams, were they instituted as a policy?
Where they're on all the time, regardless of whether the driver wants them on or not.
Would be a huge deterrent.
Yeah. When you have that, the incidence rate drops to almost nothing. And we see that in taxi cabs, right? Everybody's used to it. It's not a crazy thing to have a camera in the car, but the reason that these companies don't want to do that is because it would strengthen the arguments that these drivers are in fact their employees.
So let me just pause there for a moment, because I imagine that folks out there listening to this are wondering, because we all use rideshare. I use Uber and Lyft all the time. I'm sure we all do. They're probably thinking, okay, how do I protect my family? Or if I'm a driver, how do I protect myself? It sounds like for drivers, investing in a dash cam that's on all the time would be a wise investment to really add a safety feature and a deterrent. I'm curious if there's anything else that you would recommend drivers do to protect themselves, or that families who themselves or their children or relatives, whoever, use these services as passengers can do to protect themselves.
Yeah. So what I typically recommend is that people, first of all, if it's a driver, I say you should get please get a dash cam. Tell the person the dash cam is recording at the beginning of the ride. It's important. A lot of drivers you'll see will put a little sign in the car that says, just so you know, you're being recorded. It helps. It
seems like an easy thing to do, and that's very sensible.
And is that required under the law, or is that something you're saying would just be helpful in protecting them?
Helpful in protecting them. Yeah. I have clients who have had their assaults caught on camera. It's not going to completely eliminate the problem, but people tend to act a little bit differently when they think they're being recorded. By that same token, I oftentimes will recommend, well, first of all, I recommend if you are especially a female, don't be intoxicated in a car driven by a stranger, particularly by yourself, if you can avoid that. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people use rideshare for. But they have done studies, and there are, danger indicators. And one of those are, the likelihood of a bad outcome increases if it's a single woman by herself, and if she's picked up late at night, so after 10, usually before like 6 a.m., and if she's picked up from a drinking establishment or a traditionally female frequented establishment. So nail salons, things like that. There are predators that use these platforms, both on the driver's side and on the passenger side. So think about that, right? If you were a predator, where would you go? And make sure you make sure it's your ride. But what I tell my clients typically is if you can do anything to avoid riding alone, do it. But also, I will often say to my driver, if I'm riding alone, and sometimes it's the case, I'll say, hey, I hope it's okay. I'm on a video call with my husband. Or, hey, I hope it's okay. I'm live chatting with a group of friends right now. And I'll just tell them, not, hey, just so you know, there's a camera running, please don't assault me. But hey, just so you know, I have a camera running. And I'll say it in the nicest way possible. And I'll be like, hope it doesn't bother you. I'm live streaming right now. I mean, I barely know what that means.
That's really smart.
But they know. And then I interact with my phone. I don't put in headphones, be on my phone, not paying attention, because I never sit in the front seat. Don't ever sit in the front seat. Please. And I just make sure that I take these sort of very simple precautions so that people know there's a camera running. There's somebody else who knows where I am and is interacting with me. And I try not to be someplace where they can very easily reach me.
That's all great advice.
What about just taking a taxi instead of a ride share? Do we know the statistics on that? If it's safer just statistically because they have the cameras and maybe, and I know it's not as practical. But.
Yeah, we don't have great statistics. What I understand is that many people do feel that is a safer option. I can't say for myself if it is or isn't. I personally take Uber Black, not to do an ad, but that's what I take. And I do that not just because there are dash cams, but because the background check process is better. And a lot of people have been, particularly a lot of people who work in this industry, this type of law, have been taking the autonomous cars, self-driving car.
Waymo and Zeus.
It's not available everywhere.
Right.
So it's just not available for everyone. But I know a lot of people feel a lot safer in that regard.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about, and then we've been going for a while, so we'll wrap up soon. I want to get into some rapid fire questions just to get to know you a little bit further. It'll be a fun thing. But just to wrap up this segment, I would love for you to share with our audience some of your work in the rideshare sexual assault context, because you are one of the national leaders when it comes to prosecuting sexual assault cases against rideshare companies. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing there. So,
this has been something that there's a lot of lawyers who are working on these cases across the country. I am in great stead, great company. And right now there are coordinated cases at both the state court level and at the federal level against both Uber and Lyft. And both of the coordinated federal cases, they're called multi-district litigation. It's not a class action, and people get confused about that a lot, but it's a grouping of individual cases. And the way that this works is when there are hundreds or thousands of cases across the country that are all dealing with kind of the same subject matter, they'll get grouped together in front of a single federal court judge who will then manage the litigation. And it's a great, it's something that the judiciary decides to do. And it's a lot of efficiencies of process.
And the idea is we don't want to have courtrooms and courthouses all across the country, filled with all of the same type of case, when in fact you're going to be relying on the same parties, same evidence, same documents, etc. Let's put all of that in the same courthouse and just have one judge oversee it. And that's what an MDL is.
And then you have consistency, etc. And so typically what happens when you have one of these types of groupings of cases, which at the federal court level are called MDLs, you'll have a leadership slate. And that's a group of attorneys who have said, I will work on this and I will help move this forward for everyone. And we have that I happen to be on that leadership group. I'm not one of the co-lead, like there's 3 women actually for both the Uber and Lyft who are the leads, the absolute leads. And then they have a grouping of about a dozen attorneys who are working with them. That's considered the leadership group. And I'm on the leadership group for both of those cases.
And those are cases happening at the federal level, MDLs against Uber and against Lyft.
Right. And both of those cases are actually being administered out of the Northern District of California in San Francisco. They're being presided over by different judges, Judge Lynn and Judge Breyer, both of whom are doing absolute fantastic job. And they're at different stages, but that's where we are currently. And I work on that leadership group, and I work primarily on case specific. So selecting cases to be tried and then helping identify and move those cases forward.
What are the objectives of the litigations in those 2 MDL cases against Uber and Lyft?
So the objectives of them are to hold the rideshare companies accountable. And this is just as important, to help motivate these companies to make safety changes so that it is safer. And we have seen that be effective. Over the course of these litigations, over the course of the past few years, like I said, we've seen a wave of legislation that I'm not very happy with, but we've also seen these companies instituting more and more safety measures. And that is driven in large part by the good work that all of the attorneys who are my colleagues in this have been doing. Because as we make it expensive for companies to operate in unsafe ways, then they stop doing that. And that's been a huge motivating goal for the rideshare litigation, as well as for the fertility litigation that we were talking about. That's much earlier, but we want companies to operate in safe ways. We don't want to just say, well, let's just not have rideshare. Let's have rideshare, but let's have it be safe. And you will, if you use rideshare, as most of us do, you will probably have noticed that a lot of things have changed over the past few years. If you're stopped, the rideshare company may reach out to you and make sure you're okay, right? There are other safety measures that are being instituted across the board, and that's been a huge goal of this litigation. The other obvious goal of it is to get remedies for people who've been through these terrible experiences, because we do have clients who have been sexually assaulted. We do have clients who've been from the gamut, from being groped to actually being raped. And that is an absolutely horrible and life-changing experience. Some of those happened while the person was just trying to do their job,
right?
Or just trying to get home.
It's incredible.
And it's something that should never have happened. And so getting accountability and remedy for those clients so that they can afford therapy, so that they can afford to move forward with their lives, that's, of course, a primary goal.
And when you say remedy, one of the major remedies there is compensation. And much like your fertility negligence cases, where it's very difficult to quantify the harm and what a particular case is worth for the loss of an embryo, for example, it's really difficult to quantify the loss of one's body autonomy through a sexual or physical assault. But ultimately, what you're trying to do there is hold them financially accountable by placing some kind of a value, notwithstanding the imperfect nature of that, to allow the person to kind of close that chapter and move forward in their lives. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and that's the difference, right, between civil and criminal litigation. So I'm not a criminal attorney. I can't throw anybody in jail, but what I can do is hold the company that knew this risk and decided to operate in a certain manner, even though they knew that this was a significant risk of operating in that manner. I can say, well, look, you have to be held accountable. You have to compensate my client for that. I wish there was something else that the court system could do, but that is the way our legal system is developed, right? It's that we compensate people with money. It's not perfect. There's no amount of money that anybody would agree to take in exchange for going through one of these experiences, but it is what our legal system can bear. And so what I try and do for my clients in the sex assault practice, as well as for the fertility practice, is not only let them know that I'm on their side, get them financial compensation that will make their lives easier, particularly if they had to leave their job because their job was being where they had been assaulted, but also just give them a voice and know that they have a team of people at our firm who believe them, who do not blame them for what happened, and who are ready to stand up and, fight on their behalf. And that, I think, for our sex assault clients, as well as our fertility negligence clients, is in many cases even more important than any financial compensation, but knowing that their voice is going to be heard and we're going to fight on their behalf.
That's beautifully stated. And I think a good place to stop on that particular segment. Really appreciate you just sharing your expertise and your insights. This episode, I think, is probably the longest one we've had.
Sorry.
But no, I think it's been fantastic. And the reason I think, it's worth taking some additional time to go over these practice areas is because they're just not very well known.
Mm-hmm.
They're so unique. And part of what we're trying to achieve with this podcast is to, demystify some of these practices and show people who are listening in and members of the public that there is an opportunity for legal redress, even in situations where it may not seem, particularly intuitive.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing everything. Before we finish, I've got some questions here, some rapid fire questions. Do you have your list?
I don't have a list.
Okay,
Can I
I've got
get
it. You want to? Yeah, let's do this. Do you want to kick us off here, Shreen? Because these are supposed to be fun, and I'll start with the coffee or tea.
Oh, coffee.
Coffee, black, cream, sugar. What do you do?
I like almond milk.
Oh, me too.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Early bird or night owl?
Neither. Night owl, I guess, between those two choices. But
What are
not
you,
an early
middle
bird.
of the day, gal?
I'm in the middle of the day.
Okay.
Early to bed, late to rise. This is night owl, I would say.
Okay.
Elon Musk is the world's first trillionaire. Your thoughts?
I can't. I mean, not a fan of any part of that sentence. Ugh.
Favorite vacation spot?
So many. Japan, Italy,
Ooh.
Australia. I could keep going.
You've been to all these places?
Mhm.
Oh, fantastic. We'll have to bring you back and talk about some of it.
Mm.
The World Cup Team USA is out. Who's your team left? Are you following?
She just said sorry, go ahead.
I don't even think I know the answer. Sports ball?
Sports ball. I don't know.
Yeah, we're not doing sports questions anymore,
the
Ryan.
sports ball that people like, the one you listening
Professor
to this
Pelly.
podcast, your team, we know what it is. I'm on your side.
France.
I just told you, the person listening to the podcast and I know
Oh, right. Right.
what the team is.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't have to say it.
That's good.
It's the obvious choice. So
Okay, I want to hear this one. Something you wish you could tell your 20-year-old self, Tracey Cowan.
it'll be okay. Just keep on fighting, like truly it's so cheesy, but believe in yourself and keep on fighting for your voice to be heard, because it really will be. And you just got to get there.
That would be a great place to stop, but I have to ask a couple more. Cats or dogs?
Both.
Okay.
You know me. I have been a cat person my whole life. And then we had a dog and I was like, I love dogs too. So now both. I'm a sucker for any tiny fuzzy creatures.
AI, hype or helpful?
Oh, I'm so old. I find it to be hype.
Okay.
But I'll get there. I was a slow adopter to cell phones too. You know what? Like, give me 10 years. I'll get there.
Favorite curse word?
Fuck.
A good one. All right. We'll end on this one. What are you most looking forward to in the next year?
So many things. In the next year, I am really looking forward to providing a new place for my family. And we're moving.
That's
and
exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And I'm really excited for it. It's a small win, but it's a really big win for our family. And having everybody really feel like they've got their own space. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Will you stay up in the Bay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
We're
good.
moving very close to where we currently live.
Fantastic. Tracey Cowan, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again for being
Thanks
here.
so much. That was a great interview.
thanks for being here and letting me talk. You know, it's my favorite.
No, it's super fun. We'll come back and we'll do more of these. All right. I think we'll leave it there.
Sounds good.
Episode 11 in the books.
Yeah. You want to read us out?
I'm going to read us out. Or do you want to read us out?
Sure.
Read us out.
Okay. Represent More is a production of We Are Them Media, featuring me, Shireen Clarkson, and my co-host, Ryan Clarkson.
Boom.
Represent More is produced and edited by Marketing for Justice and Q Michelli and recorded live at our studio in Malibu, California. Alex Ulrich is also our studio manager. Be sure to subscribe to Represent More wherever you get your podcasts and find us on Substack at representmore.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.